if you look at what is happening, the air raids tonight against the energy infrastructure, Putin is not showing any willingness for the time being to seriously negotiate. He wants peace on his terms. And we must make sure with the new US administration that we come to a deal which also secures Ukraine's future, but also Europe's security.
This week, the German Chancellor Olaf Schulz phoned Russia's President Putin for the first time in 2 years and called on the Kremlin leader to negotiate with Ukraine and aim for peace.
Well, Germany itself will go to the polls in the new year with a snap election called following the collapse of its ruling coalition. So what next for European and UK security? The German ambassador to the UK, Miguel Berger, joins us now. Welcome to Times Radio.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Well, let's start with that phone call, shall we? Because your Chancellor Olaf Schulz did call President Putin. It's the first time they've spoken in 2 years, I think. President Zelensky has said that opens a Pandora's box, that it's a dangerous precedent to set. What was the need for that phone call? Why did it happen?
Yeah, I think it's important. It was important before the G20 summit to get the diplomatic process started. And I think it's better that Chancellor Scholz is the first to call Putin than the future President Donald Trump. So we need, as Europeans, to have a role and a say in a future diplomatic solution. And President Zelensky yesterday in a radio interview said that he thinks that next year there will be a diplomatic solution to that war. And diplomatic solution means talking. Even if we don't like to speak to Putin, we have to talk to him.
Do you think that Donald Trump has been able to say something that European leaders have felt for some time, that there is a diplomatic solution needed, that a deal basically between Ukraine and Russia needs to happen? No one in Europe has been able to say that because the position has been we'll support Ukraine no matter what. Donald Trump has come in, got re-elected, said it straight off the bat, and now, Germany, Olaf Scholz has called Putin straight away. Why not do that before Trump?
Yeah, I think we are all worried about an outcome which would jeopardize Europe's security in the foreseeable future. If the deal would be a deal which would embolden Putin, then this is not what we look for. So Europe needs to be at the table. We need to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position that is achievable, and that means that Europe needs to engage. So I would not say that we didn't want a diplomatic solution. On the contrary, if you look at what is happening, the air raids tonight against the energy infrastructure, Putin is not showing any willingness for the time being to seriously negotiate. He wants peace on his terms. And we must make sure with the new US administration that we come to a deal which also secures Ukraine's future, but also Europe's security.
And what would that deal look like from a European perspective?
I think it needs to be a deal where we would never recognize Russia grabbing land from Ukraine, where we would strengthen Ukraine's defense for the future and give them the necessary assurances for their security.
Does that include Crimea?
That has to include Crimea.
But Russia would never accept those terms.
Let's see where the negotiations will go. First, we have to see if Russia is really willing to engage. And I think it's very important to underline Putin wants to project strength. He thinks he's on the winning side. But Russia is weaker than many people think. That he needs the help of North Korea and the help of Iran shows that there are also limits to his possibilities.
So before we get to those negotiations, which everyone's talking about, does that mean Europe has got to do more? For example, the use of long-range weapons into Russian territory, perhaps even increasing military support, which there's been some reluctance in Germany to do.
Adam, very important to underline, Germany is by far the strongest military supporter of Ukraine in Europe. 8 billion only this year, more than France and the United Kingdom together. About the long-range missiles, I think it's first for the countries who have delivered these weapons to take this decision. It's not an easy decision, and that's why this deliberation has taken some time now.
And as far as the eventual settlement goes, the key questions are membership of NATO, protection, obviously, from the Western Security Alliance, but also the possibility of joining the EU. Where does Germany stand on those two?
I think it's too early to take a decision there. What will be important is that Ukraine gets security assurances that will be convincing for Russia. Because if that doesn't happen, then there will be a lot of doubts about the effort to reconstruct and the risk of a new war in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And we have to avoid that.
I mean, you mentioned that Russia is weaker than some people think. I mean, there are conversations going on at COP at the moment in Azerbaijan about essentially allowing Russian oil to keep flowing into Europe, pretending it's Azerbaijan oil, but actually it will be Russian. Does that make sense to you? You're here talking about how there needs to be a deal, that Putin can't be allowed to get everything he wants, and yet you seem to be negotiating a way to keep Russian oil flowing into Europe.
Yeah, let me say very clearly, Germany has stopped immediately after the beginning of the war, in a question of months, all the oil and gas deliveries. So there are some European countries, Hungary made a deal with Russia, and there are others who are seeking these kind of deals. We would like to cut all oil and gas supplies to Europe, no doubt about it.
But that's not going to happen, is it?
Let's see. Russia stopped the oil supply of Austria today after a commercial dispute. So I'm not sure where this is going.
On Germany, in terms of your kind of position in Europe at the moment, I mean, we mentioned this snap election. How reliable or a constant or stable partner is Germany in Europe right now?
Germany is obviously a key country in the European Union, and it's very important to understand the difference to British politics. Here, you have an election, and the next day the winner is the Prime Minister. In Germany, the Chancellor stays as long as there is no new coalition and an absolute majority for a new Chancellor. That means that Chancellor Scholz will stay in power, I would say, at least till Easter next year. And the government is capable to act. And this was also part of the phone conversation with Zelensky of Chancellor Scholz, to tell him whatever happens in Germany, the military and economic aid to Ukraine is assured in the German budget.
But Germany, things are changing in your country. I mean, there's a huge conversation going on about immigration. Germany's taken some steps that other European nations have balked at on immigration, essentially making it more difficult. Do you think that freedom of movement can and still should exist in the European picture?
Absolutely. We need to maintain freedom of movement within the Schengen area. What we have introduced are random border controls in order to catch people smugglers and criminals. But what we have to do, and we are working also here with the British government, is how can we strengthen police cooperation against the criminal gangs? How can we strengthen cooperation in countries of transit and origin? And one of the things the Prime Minister and Chancellor Scholz agreed in August is to work on an action plan on migration. So I think, and you're absolutely right, migration is a big topic in the elections. And we need to work together in Europe in order to handle that crisis.
What do you make of the plans from the new Labour government here to strike deals with places, around the world, countries around the world, pay them to prevent people from leaving and maybe to return people who have arrived here in the UK illegally to those countries?
If it is about getting countries to engage, then this is something the European Union has been doing for a while with Turkey, with Tunisia, with Morocco.
But it's not working that well, is it? And it's costing lots of money.
It is working quite well with Turkey, and Turkey is helping to integrate refugees. They are also acting against smugglers and gangs. They have reduced the possibilities of visa-free travel. So I would say it is working quite well. And the numbers this year have decreased, I would say, at least a third compared to the year before. So we will not be able to stop migration overall if we don't engage with countries of transit and origin.
What about the human rights implications, though? Because some people say the countries that the EU are paying at the moment to try and help deal with this issue have very tough policies. They force people back. They put people in camps where there are real, questions about human rights abuses. Are you comfortable with that?
This is a constant topic, and we have therefore not made a deal with a country like Libya, because there were terrible detention centers where people were mistreated. With Tunisia, we have talked with them about bringing people, refugees, leaving them in the desert. So human rights issues need absolutely to be addressed.
Just before you leave us, because I know time's limited, have things changed with the election of the new government here? Do you, from a German perspective, both bilaterally and as a leading member of the EU, do you detect a change? Is it becoming more cooperative?
Absolutely, yes. What we see is a real willingness to reset the relationship with the European Union. The government has reached out bilaterally, but also to Brussels. One example is the Trinity House Defence Agreement between the United Kingdom and Germany. I just mentioned that we are working on migration, we are working on a bilateral treaty. And concerning the reset with the European Union, we obviously have to wait for Brussels to have the new Commission up and running. So I'm pretty optimistic that with the summit, which was announced between Prime Minister and Ms. von der Leyen in early spring, we will get into negotiations on the reset.
If there is a trade war between the EU and Trump's America, what would you hope that Britain would do in that trade war?
You know, I think I would not limit it to the topic of trade. Overall, Europe, the European Union, United Kingdom, we need to engage the new US administration on a variety of topics. Ukraine is one, trade is another, climate change will be a third one, and we are stronger if we do that together and united.
And how likely do you think it is that the UK might eventually sign up to a youth mobility scheme, which I know a lot of EU nations would like to see happen?
I hope for it, and I can tell you that all 27 member states in the European Union are definitely in favor of offering possibilities for young people. And it is so important to underline this has nothing to do with migration or freedom of movement. It would be a limited number of people for maybe 2-3 years, and then they would all go back to their countries of origin. So it's simply a possibility for young people to experience, to work, to travel, and have that possibility.
And have you got the subtle nod from Keir Starmer that that's something he would like to make happen, if he can do it politically?
That will be up for the negotiations, but it will be definitely our topic.
Very diplomatic. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us on the programme today. That's the German Ambassador to the UK, Miguel Berger.